Hello and welcome to Reese Ryan Writes channel. I am Reese Ryan. This is where romance authors and readers connect. And we normally do a very reader focused show based on interviewing a particular author. Today is a more writer centered show, and we're having a very important discussion around RWA, Romance Writers of America, the trade organization for romance writers. If you have been in romance landia at all, you are aware of how the organization kind of blew up at the end of last year. Just decades of racism and other issues came to a head, and it just kind of blew up. So there have been a lot of people, me in particular, and a lot of people who have kind of stepped away or kind of taking a wait and see approach because there was a complete turnover of all of the leadership of Romance Writers of America. So there's been a new leadership, and so a lot of us have been kind of waiting to see how things are going. So today is the discussion where I personally want to know how things were going and what the future is looking like, and it seems like an awful lot of you also wanted to know. And so we're going to be discussing that with three members of the current board. I'm grateful that they're coming to talk to us today. So I'm going to introduce them or bring them on one at a time. And y'all know I'm blind, so I have to put my glasses back on. So I'm going to start with board president, Alyssa Day. Alyssa, thank you for joining me. So let's start off with you telling us a little bit about who you are and what you write.
Okay, sure. I'm Alyssa Day. I write paranormal romance, fantasy, and paranormal mystery.
Awesome. And what has RWA been to you personally and to your career, and what prompted you to want to join the board during such a tumultuous time in the organization?
Tequila. So I joined RWA at the end of 2001. 9/11 had just happened, and my husband, who was a Navy flyer at the time, was one of the first squadrons sent out. And I was walking the floors, working as a trial lawyer with two children under 5, wondering who was shooting missiles at my husband. And all my life I'd wanted to write a book, and we had friends at the Pentagon. Anyway, it just felt like it was a time to follow your dreams because life might be shorter. And the first conference that I saw coming up was the Seattle chapter Romance Writers of America conference. And so I went and I just fell in love. I fell in love with the people of romance who were kind and gracious and didn't mind that I was completely new and knew nothing. And when they said, "Are you writing single title?" I'm like, "Well, how many titles can you have? Pretty much a book has one title." So it was that level of knowing nothing. And so I've been a member ever since. This is going on 19 years. And I've met so many of my best friends in the world in RWA and had a lot of great networking and wanted to be part of bringing that to all of our members.
Thank you. Well, thank you for taking some time to be here today. And so next we have up is Chilove, who is the secretary.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. So Chilove, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you write.
All right. Well, I'm Chilove, the current secretary for RWA, past president for the Simmer chapter. And I write contemporary romance, dabble a little bit with paranormal, and happy to be here tonight. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Now, why was it so important to you to join RWA at the board at such a tumultuous time?
Well, I think Alyssa said it right with the tequila, but you know, when I first joined RWA, I joined because there was an event in my life that led me to wanting to find something that can make me happy. So writing became therapy for me. And finding that therapy, I met a lot of people. had a chance to learn more about writing, craft building, and reading. And so I joined RWA as a pro, and from there I was able to become a published author. And it was because of the relationships and the education and the camaraderie that I felt within RWA that allowed me to achieve those things. And so in SIMRA, we were kind of in a bubble because that is the only multicultural chapter for RWA. But it was just beautiful. So many women of color, authors of color, writing and talking about romance. And when everything happened in December, I realized that these were women who could have been Courtney. They could have been impacted in the worst way, and they deserve opportunities. And the only way to make RWA better is to be within to make that change. And so I decided to go to the board because I want women who look like me and who are of other marginalized communities to have the same opportunities that I have had. And I can only do that by being a part of the board.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. Appreciate you being here. And next we have Director at Large, LaQuette is joining us. Hello. And tell us a little bit about who you are and what you write.
I'm LaQuette, and I write mostly high heat, sometimes erotic romance. I dabble in everything from African American romance to interracial romance, but usually contemporary. I'm working on my first cowboy romance now, so that's gonna be fun.
Exciting.
See how that turns out, especially since I'm a Brooklyn girl. Writing has just always been part of my life. It's always been my best mode of expression. And I have always been an avid reader. But at the age of 16, a high school friend of mine, I was teasing her about, bringing these trashy novels to school all the time. And she kind of shut me down and said, have you ever read one? And I hadn't. So she's like, here, take this. And I went home and I devoured it. And the next day I was like an addict. I needed another one, another fix. And ever since then, I've always known that if I was going to write, it had to be romance. And so when the opportunity came to write, there was never any other choice for me about what I would write. And I would write to see myself on the page. I wanted to make sure that myself and people that looked and lived like me were represented on the page, which wasn't necessarily the case when I started reading romance probably close to 30 years ago.
Well, thank you. And so the next question is, why was it so important for you to be a part of the board, especially at such a tumultuous time in the organization?
Ooh, I keep asking myself that. Every time I open my inbox.
And give us the short version, because we got a lot of stuff to get into.
I was very much ready to walk away from RWA, actually. I actually did quit. And when I did, I got calls from SIMRA members and other authors of color who weren't necessarily a part of SIMRA, but still a part of the organization, who called me and said, we don't want to walk away. And we know if this new version of RWA is going to have any chance of coming about, we need to be at the table, and we need someone who has spoken for us and who has advocated for us to do that. And I was really trying not to do that because I had just ended my presidency as for RWA NYC. I was getting my life back. I had 8 books to write that I had just been contracted to do. I had no intention whatsoever of being on the board of RWA, but it stuck with me that if we were not at the table, we would not have any say in the decisions made. And then we'd be right back in the same spot where people were making decisions for us who really could not understand our perspective. And so, I'm here.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for being here. I'm going to ask you a question, and this, again, we have a lot of stuff to get into. So if you could answer this as succinctly as you can. I know it's going to be hard. But the question is, what has been your biggest challenge since you started on the board? And I'm going to go backwards this time. I'm going to start with LaQuette.
My probably the thing I've had to learn to do is to not, not clap back as much as I would like to. I'm really serious. I'm not very diplomatic. I say what's on my mind. And I have, I still do that on the board, Alyssa, and who will tell you that. I don't bite my tongue, but oftentimes because of the way RWA is structured and Alyssa being president and being the voice of RWA, I can't always say what I want to say when I want to say it. So that has probably been the most difficult thing to deal with.
I got a feeling that's probably the same, pretty much close to the same answer for all of you. So I'm going to head right into the questions then, because we have a lot. So we probably not going to get to all of them. We could easily probably do a part 2 on this. Let me just be honest. So I'm going to start with questions regarding leadership and staff. Angelina M. Lopez asks, what checks and balances have you put into place to make sure the lawlessness of some past leadership does not happen again? How can we make sure that future presidents can't circumnavigate the rules?
You want me to take that one?
Yep.
Yeah, I know. This is LaQuette being restrained these past 4 months. I'll tell you what, I love these 2 women to death because they have helped me in so many ways in dealing with so many issues on this board. And I'd like to touch back a moment, if I could, on the question you asked about what the biggest challenge has been, because there have been so many, which is why when people asked me to do this, I said no, one fewer time than they asked, which is why I'm here. But the challenges have been, there have been a multitude. I mean, the past leadership threw us into an international crisis. We've had 30 years of racist action by some members. We had a brand new board that nobody but me and one other person had ever been on a national board before. So while we were doing all of the work that needed to be done, we were also training them to be board members. We had a brand new executive director who is amazing, but she still was brand new. We had an unprecedented global pandemic. You know, I keep using the word unprecedented in this presidency because it's been, everything about it is just a whole new world. And all of that together has been an amazing challenge that there have been just really fantastically hard work by the board members, and I couldn't be prouder of serving with them. In terms of going forward, the thing that we had to do, we had 4 main goals we had to tackle right away. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, absolutely. That blew us apart. Chapter leadership training. We need to make sure that all the chapters are treating people the way they need to be treated and interacting nationally with us all. The code of ethics had to be rewritten so that it was fair and enforceable. The previous was not enforceable as written, and it was enforced on an ad hoc basis, which I'm a former trial lawyer, so I apologize if I speak legal, but you can't have due process if you're treating one person one way and another person the other way. So one of my big goals has been that we have the process and the policy in place so that there is we take the subjectivity out of governing RWA. So it won't be some, my husband's a 25-year Navy guy, but I have the sailor mouth, so I'm trying really hard to be careful here. But so we wouldn't have some lame-ass rando, oh, well, Sue Author has a complaint. We'll just throw it to this staff member who may or may not deal with it or may not pay attention or may say, oh, I'm not interested in you. I don't want to bother. You know, there need to be procedures so that this complaint comes in, this is done with it, this is the procedure, this has followed every time, and there's backup. So if you talk to a staff member, you have a problem with that staff member, you have an appeal process to a different. There need to be processes and policy in place for how the board does things. It can't be random, wild, oh, we'll make up an ethics committee and we'll do something. You know, every single thing needs to be in place. And I know I frustrate people on the board sometimes because I'm such a, this needs to be the rule, this needs to be the way we do it. But when you have process that is properly documented, formatted around a goal basis core of diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, then people can't do subjective, arbitrary things because there's not room for that. It has been put in process that things will be handled in this way. What I can't do, what we can't do as a board, is legislate people's personal opinions. And we've seen in this country that there are a lot of people with really shitty personal opinions. But what we can do is we can make sure that they are not going to pull that crap in RWA and get away with it. Because now there are going to be process-defined consequences for every action, every communication within RWA.
I like that, process-defined consequences. Okay, and that actually kind of leads me into a related question. Is Shannon Monroe asked, have the gatekeepers amongst the staff been handled accordingly? My recollection of the events and actions over decades is that the many wrong things were not only coming from various board members, but also by staff who we have no say in their tenure as members. So the question of, you know, staff who perhaps did not take seriously ethics complaints. Her question is, how have those things been dealt with?
We have 3 staff members who are particularly called out and documented as being problematic over the years, and all 3 of them are gone from RWA. We have hired a diversity consultant who has worked with staff some, and we have ongoing, and I'll let LaQuette talk about that. We're also going to certify our staff members in diversity, equity, inclusion, and access with continuing education every year to make sure this doesn't happen again. And our new executive director, Leslie Scantlebury, is very much at the forefront of taking point on those issues when it comes to staff. But I'd like LaQuette to answer that as well.
Yes, so we are in the process of developing with a DEIA professional a set of training modules, which will become mandatory for membership. So not just to join membership, but also to maintain membership. It is something that will happen on every level. So we're, again, hiring professionals to teach our staff so that our staff can then educate our membership on an individual basis as needed. We are having these modules created so that there will be no excuse for why you didn't know that this is the new culture. Our goal is to make everyone culturally competent so that we don't have people who will say, I don't know, because if you are a member, you must know. It is no different from being in your job, your place of business. You know that regardless of whatever your personal feelings are and what you do and don't like or how you do and don't feel, you know, at your work, you can't behave in certain ways because your employment could be at risk for it. And we need to create that same sort of culture where people understand that it's not acceptable to harm members because you think that it's okay for you to have this opinion. You're more than welcome to have that opinion, but you're not welcome to inflict the pain on other people.
Awesome. Thank you very much for those answers that I personally feel better about. So thank you for that. So we're going to move on to the topic of how racism and homophobia in RWA is being handled. We had several questions around that, obviously. Let's see. Crystal Perkins asked, how is the organization going to deal with racism and homophobia that seems to run rampant in the forums? Will you revoke memberships for those and others who are harmful to fellow members?
Well, go ahead, Kriya.
Okay. So I'll say is, That's a very good question. And one of the things that we've heard over and over again is how toxic the forums can be. I will be honest and say that the forums was a place I avoided because of the environment that was there. And LaQuette will talk a little bit about this later, but she and I overlap on two task force. The one is the Code of Ethics, and the other is the DEIA task force. And so, as she alluded to, with the DEIA, it will be mandated that all new and current members receive the training, and they will have to certify that they have received the training. And in order for them to be a part of the forum, they have to have received that training. The Code of Ethics will then jump in to help ensure that the behavior that is taking place on that forum is aligned to our standards for being a member within RWA. So while we cannot change a person's view, how they feel, what we can do is make sure they don't bring that foolishness in our forums, at our events, and anything that is RWA sanctioned. And if they don't like it, they can leave. Because our goal is to make this organization a safe and welcoming place for all people. And so while you are within the organization, we expect you to behave in a certain way. And so those views are not welcome here, and thus they are not welcome. So that's how we feel about it.
Okay, I wish I had like applause effects, because I would be having the applause and would have the Arsenio, all of that. So thank you. Okay, I need to hear that. Thank you. Okay, so you guys have covered how I'm from the Midwest, so don't take that offense to me saying you guys. You talked a little bit about the change in bylaws and policies and stuff, because Alyssa, you mentioned before about how they were written, they were unenforceable, because Kilby Blades had mentioned about the former bylaws and policies or whatever, and how the language seemed clear, but there was nothing happening. So the question is, she asked is, I want to know whether people who have behaved this way in the past will be retroactively kicked out for if they violated conduct on the forums, or if they disqualified or low scored AOCs in the reader awards.
You cannot retroactively apply new policy. It doesn't work that way. So unfortunately, no, that's not something we are capable of doing. But what we can do is, from the moment the new policy is established, the new COE is established, from that point on, that is the standard.
Okay, and that makes sense. And what I will say is, okay, let me hold on a second. Let me turn it up. That makes sense. And what I will say is, usually people who behave that way, they don't stop.
Do it again.
Yeah.
Let's do it again. That'd be fun. I've gotten emails from these people. I've gotten emails from people telling me that I violated their civil rights as a white person, and I just sort of celebrate and do a happy dance. Because honestly, if that's the person you are, we don't want you in RWA.
I would agree with that 100%. Okay, so let me see. Another question on this topic.
Oh, and I also want to just say thank you for a reunion of rivals. I quite liked that book.
Oh, thank you very much.
Max is hot. The little initials over the heart thing. That was so
Thank you. Okay, so that makes sense that you can't do it retroactively, but at the same time, we all know that when you showed your ass before, you probably gonna show it again. Because
repeat offenders.
Yeah, exactly.
It also comes with a level of entitlement. Like, people who behave that way have a certain level of entitlement, and so they won't feel the need to curtail their behavior because they feel entitled to behave that way.
Okay, I heard mention earlier of chapters.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of this bigotry, of course, a lot of it was on the forums, and it came through in the reader awards and all that. But for many of us who've had challenges in our chapters, whether it was microaggressions or if it was overt, there were several people who have questions about how you're going to manage the behavior in chapters and people who are having to deal with bigotry and these microaggressions and what have you within their chapters?
Well, we have got so many exciting things going on for chapters, because part of the problem in the past was that it was so ad hoc. What one chapter would, I feel like I'm getting an echo now, I'm sorry. What one chapter would say or do to train their incoming chapter leadership, and what another one might do, and what they knew to do. And Kristen Higgins liked to tell a story that when she took over as president of Washington Romance, the outgoing president handed her a box of felt. So like, here you go, you're president now. This is ridiculous. So one of the things we've worked very hard on this term is chapter leadership training modules, because education and knowledge lies at the basis of a lot of this. And so we are going to have interactive training modules for all incoming chapters, and it's going to be, here's what you need to know. Here's what you need to know to be a chapter leader, but also here's what you need to know interpersonally to work with members, and here's how you can handle issues like this that they come up. And then the staff will be available, the code of ethics will be rewritten. All of these things work hand in hand. All of our different initiatives and task force, as C mentioned earlier, work with each other hand in hand, so that we're not reinventing the wheel or working in a vacuum, but that our chapter leadership is working with our diversity, equity, inclusion, access, is working with our code of ethics. And we're making sure that in every area, every aspect of RWA, there's education, there are clear policies, and there are consequences.
Yes, and just to piggyback off of Alyssa's response, one of the other things that we found is that when situations occurred at the chapter level, every chapter was doing something different in responding to how or whatever the infraction or the complaint was that had occurred. The new code of ethics policy removes the chapter from even being a deliberative body. All complaints go directly to nationals, and from those complaints, they are reviewed. They are reviewed by the committee, the board, and the consequences or dismissals occur by the board. So chapters have no business at this point even going through that process, and it will be a streamlined process. The consequences are the same. The results are the same. The levels that we have taken to ensure that everything is at Washington to Tampa to Emerald City, everybody is going to be the same. And it is to help ensure that this is a top-down model going forward, so we can help to make sure our chapters and our chapter leaders and our members are thriving, and they're not worried about all of the other small things that can impact everybody in their chapter and take their focus away from writing.
Okay.
And I saw there was a question. Carrie Stevens posted a question: how many hours are you working? And I will admit that since the beginning of March, I've spent between 40 and 50 hours a week on RWA.
Wow.
It was a disaster. The work needed to be done. Everything else, my life, my family, my job has been put on hold. But I'm so proud of what we've accomplished that I feel like it was worth it.
I would say so. I mean, I'm just, from what I'm hearing so far, I am very encouraged. I'm just going to say that right off the bat from what I've heard so far. And let me just repeat. I'll go over what Chilove said. So essentially you're saying with these chapters, when there's an issue or whatever, you've removed them from the process and it gets shot straight to nationals and you all handle it there. So you don't have to worry about whether it's a good old girl network.
Correct. Yes,
and that chapter where they're not gonna do anything.
Correct. And the whole gatekeeping thing, I think you had mentioned it earlier. We've also designed layers in how the complaints are submitted to a general place. And there are 2 individuals who get to see that. It is oversight by the board. So we are not tolerating anybody not having their complaint addressed either through a formal process or an informal process. The gatekeeping has been removed.
Thank you for that. And then also I wanted to say the questions around chapters were formulated from questions from Alyssa Palmer and from Ann McIntosh. Thank you for your questions. Let me see. So you're talking a little bit about ethics already. So I want to go a little bit more into that. So you talked a little, Karen Lynn had asked, how will they ensure ethics complaints are appropriately investigated and handled? You've answered that. You've taken out the chapters and taken it straight to them, taken it straight to a national organization, and you've done training and stuff that people have to be certified. So, okay, that's very encouraging. Stephanie Burke asked, will any outside auditors be brought in case of any accusations of ethic violations are brought up again?
I will say that we will bring, and I know the incoming board, which LaQuette is running unopposed for president-elect, and C is running unopposed for secretary. So we know, and Avery Flynn is running unopposed for president. So we know we're going to have people from this board continuing on the hard work. And I know that every board member and the staff are committed to doing what is right. So when there is a need for an outside auditor, that need will be filled. And this is also why we have had our attorney looking at a lot of things that in the past our previous executive director sort of flew by the seat of her pants on. And again, you know, it's the lawyer in me, but it's also the human being in me that knows if things are handled in an arbitrary and subjective fashion, there are going to be people who get the benefit of the doubt and people who get the bottom of the boot. And so that is not going to happen anymore.
That's fantastic. Okay. So there is, in some of the stuff you will have addressed in one way or another. Rebecca Hunter had asked, first of all, she talked, I don't have time to read all of it, but her message talked a lot about how she was able to re-examine some of herself a bit. And, you know, even though she, you know, never realized it, she felt like she could see how she played a role in everything that happened, or she felt she was complicit in everything that happened. So, her question was, one of her questions was, you already answered the one about the forums. She asked, what will be done to win back the trust of Black authors? And this applies to other authors of color too. And I would say also a lot of LGBTQ authors as well. How are we going to win back their trust?
I'm gonna leave this in detail to LaQuette and Steve, but I have to say that the main thing we've said all along is we're not going to ask anybody to come back based on what we say. We're going to invite them back based on what we do. And the only thing that's going to prove anything is what we actually do. And we've been, what is the expression, walking the walk? We've been walking the walk, not just running our mouths. So that's my part of it.
Yeah, I would concur. You know, as a Black author, I have strong feelings about what has gone on in the past in RWA. If I didn't, I wouldn't be board, and I wouldn't be wanting to be on the board again. It's not about us talking to people and telling people RWA is fine. You know, we came into this, as Alyssa said, it was a disaster. There were so many things burning, so many fires burning at the same time. And it's not all fixed, right? We still have a ways to go. So this is not something that's going to happen overnight. It's not something that we can just tell you, oh, everything is going to be fine. The only thing we can do is do the work, and our work will lead to, hopefully, a return of confidence, vote of confidence to our marginalized members.
I would agree, and I would also say that, you know, the previous board and some of those people who were on that board, they wanted a change, and they actually somewhat started that change. You know, they are not the ones who per se created the situation, but you know, there were the diversity summits that had began, and through those diversity summits, we saw the opportunity to talk to publishers, to talk to booksellers who, you know, agree that, you know, Black romance should not be segregated. We are continuing those conversations, even with the opportunity that through the conference of providing education to Black authors and marginalized authors. So again, it goes back to exactly what Alyssa and LaQuette has said. We can't tell you that this is the place to be. We can only show you that this is the place that you want to be. And we show you through the advocacy, we show you through all of the many things that we believe authors of color should have access to, because we are not different. We deserve to be here. We are not going anywhere. And right now, this is our chance to make it better and more inclusive. So, that's where we are right now.
To add on to what C is saying, I know a lot of people have doubts about, especially in the marginalized communities, what RWA does for them. You might not always know what RWA is doing, but I can tell you that RWA has done things for you. What Chilove is talking about is the diversity summits that were held by previous boards. And these were basically conferences where publishers, RWA, and a few marginalized authors were allowed to meet and talk about what the issues were in making publishing more inclusive. I had the pleasure of attending one of these summits, and I can tell you that from the conversations that were held in that summit, we are seeing the benefits of those things now. So when you see all of these initiatives that have been happening with publishers, that's because the conversation was had 2-3 years ago.
Exactly.
When you're seeing that Black romance is now in the romance section instead of the African American section, that's because the conversation was had at one of these meetings.
Exactly.
2 years ago. So publishing is slow, right? It's not like we can say something today and then tomorrow it happens. But I can tell you that from my own eyes, I have witnessed that what was talked about in that room, I'm seeing the fruits of that now.
Yes.
And that's a really important point, because anything to do with DEIA efforts is not a box you check off. It's not, okay, that's fixed. I did that today. It's an ongoing process. It's an ongoing conversation of networking, of learning. I took LaQuette's class.
Exactly.
We're open to a lot of things. I'm learning things from my fellow board members all the time. I mean, it's going to be an ongoing process, as it should be throughout the rest of RWA's existence. This is our core message, is that we want networking and education, professional opportunities for authors around a core of diversity, inclusion, equity, and access. And right now, I've been reaching out to every publishing professional that we have in our database, and I've sent personal letters saying, we would like to have a conversation with you. And I've got I think a dozen lined up so far. We sent them July 4th weekend, but I think a dozen lined up so far that Leslie Scantleberry and I are going to sit down on Zoom and chat with them about, here's what RWA is doing to be better. Here's what we hope you can become involved in this conversation and also be better, because publishing as a whole needs to be better, not just our writing organizations. The publishers need to do a better job. The agents need to do a better job. And these are conversations that RWA, as your advocacy group, needs to be having on your behalf. And we have started that work, and it's going to be tough work. And nobody said it was going to be easy doing this job, but it's important, and our members deserve it.
Yeah. That was actually perfect, because that segues into the next section where I was going to ask about, which is advocacy in the publishing industry, because that's the whole point, right? Is to this is a trade organization that's supposed to help us in our industry to go to bat for us. So Eliza Mann's question is, and some of this you might have already answered. Eliza Mann asks, are there specific plans to address the disparities in manuscript acceptance and equitable pay in publishing for Black authors, as well as differences in marketing Black authors? Is an addition Alexa Day added to this question?
I can say that having attended, we've hosted 3 diversity summits, and I'm not referring to the summit that was in Denver. Was that the last place we had our conference?
That was
Yeah.
Denver,
Okay.
yeah.
So we've had 3 diversity summits, and I'm not talking about the one in Denver. I'm talking about the one where a small subset of individuals who were the decision makers for publishing houses, for the booksellers, and staff and leadership within RWA. That included presidents from certain organizations. I know LaQuette was there, I was there, and I believe the Rainbow chapter was represented because those are marginalized voices. I will tell you that the conversation was had regarding pay, regarding marketing, and regarding the acceptance of manuscripts. There was even agents present, actually. So it is a conversation that has been had. I will say that there have been several initiatives that we have seen to truly help make those situations that we addressed start to not be as prevalent. So, Entangled had the author incubator program. Avon had a program for Own Voices. And there have been other houses that have done that as well. But there have been agents who have taken pitches from Own Voices authors. So what I will say is that it goes back to LaQuette. The publishing industry is not fast. We all know that it takes us a while to write a book. It takes our agent a while to get a response. It takes the editor a while to get our edit. So, I mean, it's everything moves at that pace. But what I will say is that those conversations that were had is why we are seeing the changes that we are seeing. Are there still issues? Absolutely. Will we still have these conversations? I can tell you now that we will be on their asses asking those questions. It's not going to stop. It's going to continue. So we are definitely advocating for those things. We will not stop advocating for those things. I am a Black author. I want more money too. LaQuette is a Black author. I'm telling you now, she want more money too. So we want more money too. So the conversations are not going to stop. We are demanding equity. And that is our goal. That is why we're here. And we can only do that from sitting here to make that change.
No, that ties in well with a question that Sophia Sings the Song asked on Twitter. And she said, as a former RWA member and an Authors Guild member, I'd like to know the plans for helping members negotiate better contract terms with publishers. The hashtag publishing paid me has revealed deep disparities, not just racial, but between romance and other genres as well. So did anybody want to comment further on that?
Well, I think that that's a twofold situation. Well, what RWA is doing is we're creating toolkits, things that authors should know and what to ask, because oftentimes we don't know what to ask or what to accept. And if you don't have an advocate like an agent, or maybe if your agent isn't as pushy or, as some others might be, you might not get the advance that you should get. The issue is that we need to be more aware of what our standing should be in the publishing community. And so one comes from educating ourselves. So RWA's job is to provide those educational tools for you so that you understand what a publishing contract looks like, what it demands of you, what it means when you're signing over, when you're licensing your rights to the publisher. So that will help in that regard. But again, you have to educate yourself in order to advocate for yourself. So we will give you the tools, but we still need you to fight for yourself as well.
Fair answer. That's a fair answer. And I don't know about everybody else listening, but I mean, don't get me wrong. I knew that there were disparities racially, in terms of what we were getting paid, but that hashtag publishing paid me was freaking
Yeah.
It's just like I knew it was there, but it was like 10 times worse than I thought it was. So okay, so Sage Spelling asked this question: how will the board handle racial discrimination from publisher relationships with RWA members? Will publishers, editors be held accountable for racist behavior?
I think that's a two-pronged answer. One is LaQuette and C were just saying about we're going to continue to have these ongoing conversations, telling publishers and editors and industry professional, this is what we demand. This is what we demand of ourselves first, because it would be hypocritical for us to be in a position where we're not doing what we're asking you to do. And then it's going to be a matter of ongoing. We already have a process in place by which somebody can be removed as being RWA acceptable publisher or industry professional, and that will possibly be fine-tuned in the future. And to go back to what LaQuette was talking about in the toolkits and the education process, it is so important. And we can't individually negotiate your contract for you, but what we can do is give you toolkits of here are things to look for, articles in the magazine, the trade magazine, the RWR, university classes in RWA University, so that there's always a place for you to be able to turn, say, oh, I'm interested in how I do this or how I negotiate that, or what does my option clause need to look like? And I want that information. We want that information to be available to members. And also, once we've revisited and restructured, and this will be a job for the incoming board because we had 5 months. So this was not one of our main 4 priorities, but clearly the communities of practice in RWA need to be restructured from the ground up. If it were me, I would burn them down and start over, but restructured from the ground up, because you want to have a network in place where you can say, hey, I got this clause from Kensington. Are you giving everybody this clause? Or are they just giving me this clause because they think I'll put up with it?
Mm-hmm.
And from the beginning of my career, my first book was published in 2003. It was nonfiction. But from the beginning of my career in RWA, I've always been extremely candid about terms. This is happening. These are the terms. I negotiated this. This bad thing happened to me, because I think too often online people only tell you the rainbow farts and, you know, little woodland animals singing to you in your bedroom nonsense. And that doesn't help anybody else. You know, it only helps if we share all of it. And the more we share, the more power we have in negotiation. We have to be careful in what we do, because obviously we can't violate antitrust in any way as a trade association. We can't say, do not work with this publisher. But what we can say legally is factually, we have seen that publisher A offers white author X dollars for this category of romance and offered an author of color X minus dollars for that. And sharing that information brings more power. So all of these opportunities need to be for all of our members, not just the ones who are in the secret club and in the know, or happen to know me and say, oh, well, you know, she's a New York Times bestselling author. I can ask her because she went through this. No, it needs to be, they don't have to know anybody. They just need to be an RWA member, and that gives them the power of this network.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. There's a question that came up that I'll put on the screen just now that I thought was important and should be addressed. Margaret Etheridge asks, how do we begin to repair the damage done to the organization's professional credibility? How is RWA working with various types of publishing partners to reestablish those relationships?
Thanks, Margaret. I think we've kind of addressed this in parts in 2 different questions earlier. One is the conversations we're getting ready to have with people, editors, agents, whoever is willing to have them with us, with Leslie and I. And also, the only way you repair credibility is by proving that you have changed. And so every action we take, every statement we make is a step towards repairing credibility. And that's why so many of these agents and editors have written back to me and said, we've been watching what you're doing. We're glad to see you're taking these actions. We're impressed enough that we do want to talk to you.
That's awesome. I know I feel much better with what I've heard so far. So, okay, perfect. And thank you, Margaret, for that question. There is a question from author Amy Rattan. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your last name, Amy. It's about international membership. She says, what support will RWA offer Canadian or other international chapters? I feel like other than the conference, there was no benefit to international members. The only reason I stayed was because of my chapter, but even then we felt sort of cut off from the organization as a whole. So how can RWA help those who are on a budget, especially those who have to pay a hefty exchange rate in terms of being international members?
Well, I will say through chapter outreach, what I have discovered is that I know I spoke to chapters that were in Canada. I also know that there were members in the Simmer chapter who were international. And a lot of it really boils down to what Alyssa spoke about in restructuring the communities of practice and what we are able to offer the chapters, because sometimes chapters are overwhelmed with programming because they are trying to cater to everybody in that chapter. And as we all know, there are so many different levels within a chapter. So you have those who are just starting out, you have those who are kind of midway, and then you have those who are pan published 30 books, And so one of the things that we have been in conversations with our pro advisor is one, we are going to reinvigorate the RAMP program. It was a program that we had started. It was supposed to launch, but given everything that happened, we weren't able to get it off the ground. That program will be back in the next term. And so that is a mentoring program. It is a program that's going to be beneficial for those authors who are kind of midway. And it could be for some who are, have already published a book or two, but still want that help. So you're going to have that RAMP program that will be able to cater to everyone. And that's not a program that is run by the chapter. It is a national program, international program. So anybody will have the opportunity to participate in that program to help with their professional development. And then we have talked of reinvigorating the Push to Pro program. And that again is a program that catered to those individuals who are really just starting, from querying to writing a synopsis, first 3 chapters, all of those things. And those are going to be programs that are driven from nationals, where we would provide curriculum to the chapter. So again, right now, it may not seem that we've done a lot, and I really feel like it's because of the situation that happened in December. But what I will say is that these are benefits that are going to be for all members, regardless if you're international, regardless if you're national. And you will have the opportunity to take part in these opportunities so that you can grow yourself in the craft as well as the business. So that's what we can provide to our international members.
And when you say communities of practice, you're referring to PAN and Pro, right? PAN published all
yes, PAN, Pro. Because the thing of it is, PAN, some people are offended with Pro, PAN, Indie. So it's a redevelopment to make sure that we can really capture the whole author, and that way people aren't left feeling like they're out on the outskirts of what we're doing within RWA.
And I would add to all of that we can't think of everything. So if you have an idea as a member for something that would be great in RWA, please write to the board. I mean, I answer every email I get. I try to do it within 3 days. And one member came to me last week with, you need to reach out to librarians more, because I'm a librarian and libraries need to be more open to romance. That's a great idea. So I'm bringing a motion at the August board meeting that we create a library outreach committee. That's a great idea. It is something we should be doing more of. Somebody brought it to our attention and we're going to do it. That's the great thing about being a member organization, is our members have all this amazing energy and intelligence and ideas and synergy that they can bring us things and say, have you thought of this? And we may have thought of it, and it may have not worked for reasons that aren't apparent. And then we can write back and say, we have thought of that, but for this, and this reason, it doesn't work right now. We may be able to revisit in the future. Or, no, we didn't think of that. That's great. Nobody's ever going to write back to you and say, wow, that was a stupid idea. Why'd you write me? Well, okay. I won't say no. No, I'm just kidding. But any idea that you have that could make your organization better, because RWA belongs to the members. It's not the staff's organization. It's not the board's organization. It belongs to the members.
I love that idea about reaching out. If you have an idea, like you said, you're not going to think of everything. Somebody else might have a better idea. And I definitely love that idea about, a librarian outreach, because that is definitely an issue. Not every library is very welcoming to romance. So that is good to hear. So let's talk a little bit about conference. What's happening with the conference?
So we're really excited about this conference. It's our first ever online conference, born of necessity because of the pandemic, obviously. One of our first jobs once we came on was to make sure that we weren't bankrupted by the attrition fees from the contract we were locked into the Marriott. So yay us. We worked that out. And now we're very excited about the online conference. Our staff is amazing. Our conference committee, led by Gail Shianizi, I know I'm saying that wrong. I'm sorry, Gail, but she's a rock star, and all the people on that committee are.
What are the dates of the conference?
Pardon me?
What are the dates of the conference?
August 28th to 30th. And it's just going to be very exciting. There may be a glitch or two, which is why we're giving it at a really, really reasonable price. But we've got great speakers lined up. We've got great master classes lined up. I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be exciting. And people who sign up for the conference will have access to all of those, almost all of those videos. I think there's a couple for logistics reasons not, but the majority of the videos through the end of 2020. So if you've got kids or a dog or whatever, you can't be there all day Saturday and Sunday, and you can just go back and watch it later.
Awesome. First of all, I wanted to say thank you. I'm still continuing. But I know Alyssa said she can only stay for an hour. So if you in case she has to bow out, I wanted to say thank you so much for being here and for all of your fantastic answers. But I will ask this question in case you have time to still help address this one. And I can't believe out of all the questions I got, nobody had asked that before. So somebody just popped this up. I think it was Janet 9, who asked what will be done to ensure that the judging for the Vivian Awards is fair and equitable.
Yay! I want to answer that.
Yay! Go ahead.
So, one of the things that used to really drive me crazy when the readers would come around and they would be so white over and over and over again is people would say, well, it's subjective, so you can't gauge or assess writing. People know what they like. And I'm like, that's garbage. That's not true. Like, I was a literature professor for a long time. And most of what my job was figuring out how to critique, assess, and analyze literature. So if romance, we say it's literature, right? We say it's just as important as every other genre, right? So if that's the case, then it should be able to be assessed and analyzed. And I can tell you that the Vivian Task Force, that, oh my goodness, they have come up with a lot of different methods to sort of make sure, a lot of built-in safety nets, to make sure that people aren't voting for the wrong reasons or aren't possibly dismissing quality writing that shouldn't be included in or should make it further into the contest. And one of the things we've done is we're creating judging training that's more than, do you like this book? Which is, I think the previous questions was it was like 3 questions where one of them was, did you like it? One of them was this a romance? And I can't even remember what the other one, basically all 3 of them were arbitrary. But now we're asking questions based on literary devices, on things that can actually be looked at and analyzed in a book. And I think that is extremely helpful. There's also tracking, right? So, people are like, well, you can put all those things in places, but, people can still do what they want to do. And that's true. People can. But the difference is we're creating a method so that they can be tracked. And if they can be tracked, then we can make sure that they aren't allowed to judge anymore. So there's a lot of, there's no more basically throwing rocks in and hiding your hands, right? It's not this secretive little process secretive or arbitrary process where you can just, circle in a bubble and then get your favorites in. There's really some criticism that's going into this. There's some analysis that's going into this. So I'm very excited about it.
I am too. And I'll also add that in addition to the rubric that LaQuette is speaking of and the judge training, one of the other critical components is who is judging. And so, recruiting individuals who often read and review stories featuring people of color is critical. People who review stories featuring marginalized voices, period, is critical. So making sure that we have a really good judging pool outside of the typical RWA member who would like to judge is important, and making sure that we have them at the beginning and at the end in terms of levels of making sure that we are truly pushing books through that should be worthy, and then having that final judging score to determine that is going to be a critical element in ensuring that these voices are heard. And so I'm very proud of the rubric. I'm proud of the training that has been developed, and as well as the safety nets that LaQuette has mentioned, but also who is judging, because we really needed to make sure that that judge pool was diverse.
We also are not requiring that whole thing where if you entered, you had to judge. That's gone.
Yeah, that's gone. Oh, and one other really important part is the DEIA training that will be mandatory for you to be able to judge. So we're really proud of that.
Yeah. And we have posted a lot of work. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I have a little delay there. I'm sorry to interrupt. We have posted the proposed format for member feedback, and we're looking forward to that because we will have to vote on the rules at the August board meeting. And I will say there was some anger when we said the RITAs are done, but here's why we did it. The RITA had been tarnished and over the years because of how it had been done, because of only white people were winning. And there was no more Band-Aid that could fix the RITA. The RITA had to be out, and we need to start with an entirely new award built around these core elements again of DEIA. And we were so thrilled that Vivian Stevens graciously allowed us to use her name for this because she was one of the founders of RWA, and her name has been erased from the history of the organization somewhat. We're changing that. But it's going forward, it's time to go forward. It was time for something new that was done right, that was done fairly, that was done equitably, that had measurable rubric based upon literary criticism. Change is always very hard for people, and we understand that, but there are times when their Band-Aids don't work anymore, and it's time to start from scratch.
Yeah, I actually, when I first brought you all on, I definitely envisioned that being one of the things we talked about the most. But in getting the questions from people, that actually never came up, and I was shocked. So
that's because they've all already emailed me, Reese. They've all emailed me personally. When we did this, I looked at my husband and I said,
if it gets brought up. So.
When we did this, I looked at my husband and I said, to at least 2,000 people, I will forever be that bitch who killed the RITAs just before they won one. And I got a lot of email, let me tell you.
See the emails and
I can imagine that. I was
vitriol and some of
the
them.
biggest question.
It's yeah. People weren't happy, but as Alyssa said, it's time to move on to something new.
And to be fair, some people weren't happy, but a lot of people were
that
very
makes
happy.
a lot of sense as to why you did. Because at first I was like, okay, I'll be honest. At first I was like, okay, is that the biggest thing, like changing the name of it? But it's not just about changing the name. It's about it's got this whole tarnished, ugly history, and so you want to kind of burn that down and start over. So that makes sense to me. So thank you for explaining.
Oh, and let me answer that question though, because that is a question we got a lot. Like, you have so many important things to do. Why are you worrying about the contest? And let me tell you, the contest is not on our 4 main priorities, but the board has an obligation to present the rules for the contest at the the meeting that is usually September, this time it's August, in order for the contest to be able to start in November. So we had to do that anyway. So it was going to be either we played around with band-aiding the rules for the RITA because we were required to get it started again, or we just threw it out and started new. And that's why the timing was because we had to. The throwing it out was because it needed to be done.
And also it was one of the few items that could be done without having to go through our legal channels. For affiliation, for code of ethics, for DIA, those were all things that had to have external professional opinions to weigh in, whereas this was something that the board could do a lot of internally. So it was a lot easier to get this one done than it is, let's say, the code of ethics, because we have to make sure with our attorney that those things are correct.
Thank you. So I'm going to shift to talking about the future. So Alyssa, if you still have to leave, thank you so much. If not, if you could hang, please do.
I can hang around for a little bit. My call got moved back a little bit. So
perfect, because I think we're only going to be like maybe another 10, 15 minutes. Okay. So turning to talk about the future, Kathy Douglas says, thank you to me and to all of you for doing this Q&A. And so she says, I know the board wants to change the culture and make it inclusive. What steps have they taken and what will they take in the future? You talked about a lot of that already. What is the overall plan? What is the 1-year plan, the 5-year plan? What goals have they set and how will they measure success? So you've talked to answer her earlier question, a lot of that. But she said, what's the 1-year plan? What's the 5-year plan? And what goals have you set and how will you measure success?
Well, this board is an interim board. Right, we were only here for 5 months, and our charge was to stabilize RWA, because whether people realize it or not, aside from all of the stuff that you saw in the media, like the actual organization was in danger of crumbling. And so we had no 1-year goal because we can't did. I mean, honestly, we hired, but there was no way we could sit and plan. Now we have talked about things that that the next board needs to consider, right? So we have a list of things that we feel the next board needs to consider, because they'll have a full year to be able to address those things, as well as come up with a plan, an action plan, in order to execute those things. But honestly, there was no time for a 1-year, 5-year plan, because the organization was about to crash.
We had to keep the lights on. We had to keep the lights on. That was
at that point. It was stop the bleeding, where we had all these open wounds that we had to get bandages on in order just to be able to see clear the area so that we could actually see what the damage was. So I know people would like a better answer, but the truth of the matter is, as the interim board, that was not part of our purview at all. We had to focus on the now.
Yeah. So we had a 5-month plan instead of a 1-year plan. And first we had to stabilize the organization, and we had to keep it from bankruptcy or from failing entirely. But then we also set those 4 main policy goals that we're making significant progress, and we'll have actionable, viewable programs in place by the end of our 5 months that can be built upon for the next board, who has a full year, to take and say, let's use these as the basis of our 1-year and 5-year plans. So it was a shift in the beginning from crisis management to right away, within the first 3 weeks, we had a meeting where we got our input from everyone who had input to give. And then we sat down and said, these will be our main goals. We set them by consensus, and we have put in the work, a huge amount of work, and we're seeing the results. So there will be concrete action taken on every one of our 4 main goals by the end of this term. And that's a hell of a lot in 5 months. And I could not be prouder of this board. People worked hard. Let me tell you. People are wondering, block my phone number when they see me texting.
With COVID, being trapped in the house with small people, we did this.
Yeah. Okay, so And Akila Dogby, I hope I'm not butchering that, asks, what new initiatives are they planning to bring new voices of color into the genre, and how will they support promising talent?
We have scholarships that we give out in terms of education to bring romance scholars basically into the world. We're also talking about doing something to bring RWA like chapters, so to speak, in maybe college campuses in order to get people who might be interested in romance to be a part of the group, to kind of get them in, on the ground floor and understanding what the industry, what the organization is about. So those are some of the things that we are thinking about right now. As Alyssa said, if people have more ideas that they think that we can do to bring in new voices, again, we continually do these diversity summits, and that's also about bringing in new voices that have not been part of the romance, that have not been given the opportunity to be part of the landscape. So it's not just people who have never considered romance and are now entering the genre, but it's also people who have been here who have not been allowed to participate in the genre.
Yeah, and just to add to that, another way that we are bringing voices, or will bring more voices to romance, is that we will continue to have the academic grant scholarship as well as the intern stipend. And so we, and I shouldn't say research grant. And so with the academic research grant, that allows individuals to do research in romance. And I believe the last two recipients were authors of color. And so that helps to bring more awareness to romance and to authors of color within romance. And through the internship program, there were two young ladies that we sponsored their housing allowances so they could, in fact, engage in internships with some of the top book publishers in the nation. And by doing that, we are creating pathways for them to become editors who are going to acquire own voices. So those are ways that we are also bringing, own voices to romance in several different ways. So it may not just be on the right now, but just looking to the future and making that awareness for our voices and setting people into those positions where they can, in fact, be change makers for authors who are writing diverse romance.
That is so important, because that is a huge problem in the industry, is that, even where people are trying to acquire more own voices authors, they don't have editors who really relate.
Correct.
And we don't have a lot of representation there. And part of what you identify as part of the problem is that a lot of times these internships, somebody who's struggling,
Right.
might not can't afford to do these unpaid internships. They're not getting, mommy and daddy's not paying for the,
Right.
their rent and stuff. So they can't afford to do that, and therefore they can't go into that industry. So that is huge, because that is one of the big things we definitely need, is to definitely see more editors in there, along with some of the other changes. So thank you for that. There's been some great questions from people posted earlier as well as tonight. If there are any more questions, I'm about to round it down. So I'm giving you just a little bit of time to think of a few more questions. But in the meantime, while they're thinking of that, my question to each of you is, what is your vision for the future of RWA? I realize that you all are on the interim board of 5 months. So aside from the 5 months, just for the future, what would you like to see in terms of what RWA becomes?
Well, I want to see a place where, I'm not the exception, right? I want to see a place where all authors have an opportunity, an equitable opportunity, to get their work published, to be paid accordingly, and to be successful without having to struggle, right? And to level the playing field. And I think mainstream authors may feel that they are being pushed out of the way, and that's not the case at all, because publishing is still overwhelmingly white, straight, and abled. It just is. Like it's 90-something% of the market, right? And so all of the other diverse voices are lumped into that last, 8 to 9%. So mainstream authors don't have to worry about losing their space. It's opening up the space so everyone can be there. So my goal, the reason I'm here, the reason I'm continuing to work in RWA is so that people have the opportunity to make their dreams come true.
Very nice. Alyssa or C, which one do you want to tell us your vision for the organization?
Well, I agree with everything that LaQuette said. Of course, she and I were actually supposed to ride off into the sunset together after our presidency.
Yeah.
We had a plan. We had a plan. But we also have a vision, and it's exactly what she said. It's seeing that that one or two of us are not the exception. It's seeing that there are more Black authors, more marginalized authors. It's seeing younger authors. That's also something within RWA. So we want to be able to bring in younger, fresher authors, like LaQuette mentioned, the college chapters, and train them up, because they are the generation that will come behind us to make sure that everything that we're doing right now does not change. We stay focused on diversity, equity, inclusion. We stay focused on making sure that we have access. We stay focused on making sure that RWA is that organization that everyone wants to be a part of, because everybody has a chance. And that if you take the chance, you will have opportunity presented to yourself. So I agree wholeheartedly with her, and I'm optimistic that we can get there.
Nice.
Everything they said, ditto. the whole reason that we, the three of us, because they approached me to do this, and I kept saying no. To be completely candid, I believed that an author of color should be president of RWA now, and for various reasons of what qualifications you had to have to be eligible, there weren't candidates willing to take up that spot in that small pool. And we've changed the bylaws a little bit so we can widen that in the future. But the whole reason is this should be the organization that members deserve. This should be the organization that every one of us who believes in our core mission of diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, who believes in romance, who believes in our readers, who believes in bringing happily ever after to the world, especially in such horrible times. I mean, what we do as romance authors matters so much. I get email every day from readers saying, thank you for making me laugh. Thank you for making me smile. I was just reading LaQuette's book with that sexy cop heart last week when I was having insomnia because of stress, and it mattered to me. It made me feel better so I could fall back and sleep, and that's what we bring. So every author who wants to write romance should feel welcome, not just tolerated, not just, okay, we'll give you a seat at the table, but welcome and come on in and be part of this great industry of ours, be part of this great community. And that's my Pollyanna, I guess, optimistic vision of the future. And we were all willing to do the work to make that happen. And I pray and I hope that will be the future of RWA 2.0. Wow. Sorry, I'm a little passionate about this. I'm sorry.
I really want to thank all of you for coming through, and just, confession, honesty, this whole thing, this idea to do this was like me being selfish, because I have been asked by various board members to do various things in the organization. And
I was one of them. I ain't gonna lie, I was one of them. Yes.
So different board members have asked me to do different things, and I was still like, okay, well, I don't know. So there was all these questions that I had, and so it occurred to me that if I was having like a kind of taking a wait and see approach and had these questions, maybe other writers did too, and they were waiting to hear. And so that is why I decided to ask you to do this. So I am so grateful to all of you who did this. I'm grateful to all of the other authors who contributed their questions and their comments. And we've actually had a lot of readers on here as well, like Mama Tony and Shannon Harper and stuff on here, who are also listening and care very much about this organization because they care very much about romance.
We love
And
you,
so,
readers.
yes. So
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, and thank you to everybody who's going to listen in the replay as well. So, ladies, please tell everybody where they can catch up with you or connect with you. I'll start with Alyssa. Where can people find you online?
Oh, alyssaday.com.
And all of this is going to be in the description as well, but just, and you're on Twitter and Facebook and all that good stuff?
Well, I have 2 full-time jobs right now, so I've taken a Twitter hiatus. And I've been very open about my battles with clinical depression. So sometimes I'm more able to listen to the news right now and be on Twitter than others. And right now I'm having a break, but I'm on Instagram with pug puppy pictures all the time.
Nice. Very nice. And LaQuette?
You can find me at LaQuette.com. That's LAQUETTE.com. I'm also on Twitter at LaQuette Writes. I'm on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram at _Quette.
Okay. And C?
So you can find me at Chilove.com. I am on Twitter at Chilove Writes, but I'm a bit of a Twitter introvert, so I kind of go for the comments. And then I am on Instagram at Chilove Writes as well.
Okay, awesome. Thank you all for this. And for people who are watching in the replay, please tell us in the comments what you heard that you liked. If there was something you disagree with, you can tell us that in the comments as well. But if there was something that you heard here tonight that you liked and you want to hear more about or you're excited about, by all means, tell us that in the comments. And if you enjoyed this discussion and you want to be part of other discussions like this with authors, be sure to subscribe. Hit the subscribe button. You gonna say something? Look what
about comments, right? If you like something. So here's the thing. The loud minority, the people who hate us, they have no problems in letting us know this. Mm-hmm. That's why my inbox is not a good place right now. But you know what we don't hear? We don't hear very much from members who either are encouraged or have something to contribute that they want, us to think about. So please, if you're a member and you like what we're doing, or if you feel like you can add more to our, to our things we need to think about, to our list, please email us, let us know, because otherwise all we hear is you suck. All day long.
You can reach us at president@rwa.org or board@rwa.org. Goes to all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So did you hear that? So if you heard something that you really, really liked, or you just want to say thank you to these ladies, by all means, drop your comments below. And especially if you're listening in the replay, a lot of you have already done that tonight. I don't know if you ladies were able to keep up with some of the comments that have been posted on the screen, but there's been lots of thank yous tonight for all of your hard work, especially when they heard how many hours you all are putting into this. So there's been lots of thanks for this talk, as well as for the work that you all have done tonight. So, and if you're in the replay, you can drop that in the comments, and I'm sure the ladies will come back and check that so they can hear something good aside from just the complaints of people who don't want things to change and want just things to stay the same. So thank you. I cannot thank you all enough. And thank you everybody for listening. And I'll let you ladies go now. Thank you, C. And we made it. It wasn't too bad, right?
No, it wasn't. Thank you so much. Thank you for having us. And thank you for everybody who listened.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.